Democrat and former congressional candidate from California. Aaron, thanks a lot for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
The reason I want to talk to you was a tweet that you sent out after seeing the cover, I think, on the Today Show this morning, and you wrote this. Adolf Hitler was Times Man of the Year in 1938. Donald Trump is Times Man of the Year in 2016. Discuss. And I just saw the irony there, because comparing someone to Hitler, of course, is not an invitation to discuss. It's the end of the discussion, isn't it?
Well, I think that there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from the 1930s and Nazi Germany. Not to say that this is the identical situation, but there's a lot to be gained from looking back, how we cannot make the same mistakes of the past.
Huh. So what kind of conversation, I mean, describe the discussion that you were trying to invoke by comparing Trump to Hitler.
I think that it's very important that we are critical, that we do not normalize or sanitize the rhetoric or actions of Donald Trump or the ghastly appointees to his new administration. And I want people to remain vigilant. I want people to realize that none of this is normal. None of the hate speech, the hate crimes that are spiking in the United States. And we, as the American people, have to hold our president-elect accountable.
Okay. So you've made a lot of pretty general statements. And by the way, I don't think there's any danger of Trump going uncriticized during his term as president.
Well, I think that something like hearing the way that the media...
You just compared him to Hitler now. So, I mean, clearly there's, a vigorous conversation about Trump underway, and you're part of it. But you said his ghastly appointees. Give me an example.
Today, you're talking about appointing a head of the EPA, someone who has sued the EPA on behalf of the coal industry and the coal lobby. You're talking about putting a known anti-Semite...
Who is that?
Pruitt.
Who is that?
The Attorney General Pruitt.
And what was this suit about? Do you know?
Yeah, he was suing on behalf. It was a part of what the New York Times actually called a secretive alliance between energy firms, between state prosecutors, where he is Attorney General, and between oil and gas companies. And they...
So let me just say this. I mean, it doesn't sound like you know a ton about this, but he was one of 28 attorneys general. So the majority of states sued the Obama administration over its environmental regulations. So you can't just say he was acting on behalf of oil and gas companies. The majority of states were involved in that suit.
He actually appropriated text out of a letter written by the oil and gas companies as his own.
Right. So what about that did you disagree? In other words, see, what you're doing here is you're quoting out of context of a New York Times piece that says because he has the same views as an oil and gas company, that they're illegitimate, but you're not actually making the case against him. And that, I guess, is what bothers me. I think there are a lot of cases to be made against Trump or his policies, and that's all totally legitimate. What is not legitimate and what does not lead to fruitful conversation or solutions is name-calling, and that's what you're doing.
I don't believe so. I think that someone who sues to remove protections that protect families, American families, from mercury, from arsenic, that protect our wetlands, that reduce the air pollution so that we can have a right to breathable air is not name-calling.
Nobody is contesting a right to breathable air. I guess my point, just to say it again, is you don't actually know anything about what you're talking about, and you're throwing out a lot of allegations as if someone were against clean air or for mercury. Is there another side to the case? Do you understand their position, or does that not even interest you, learning what they think?
It's not about learning what they think. It's about the fact that this man, who is the head of the EPA, the nominee, has already acted on behalf of these very things about which we're speaking. He has sued to lessen the regulations from an environmental and public health standpoint. That is fact. That's non-negotiable. Around air pollution?
It's not. You can't name a single one. I think. No, I'm not. I don't want to be mean now, but I think you studied at the Department of Social and Cultural Analysis at NYU. Do you have a degree in the hard sciences?
I do have a degree in social and cultural analysis. I'm the proud co-founder of Turning Green, a nonprofit, and we've been working on environmental advocacy since January 2005.
What's so amazing is that someone can start an environmental nonprofit with no science background. Do you think that's a little weird?
No, I don't think that's a little weird. I think that there are a number of angles to come at this from. We partner with, and I'm proud to partner, a number of environmental organizations with sound scientists on their staff. 350.org, NRDC came out today to absolutely categorically call out this man for being a climate denier.
And maybe a climate denier. So anybody who disagrees with the received point of view that you espouse is not a legitimate critic
This
or raising
man
questions.
Is
He's a denier
of the fossil fuel industry. He is a puppet.
Right. Yeah, I don't actually think you know anything about him or the suit, and I don't think you have the background to make those claims.
I can
This
cite
is what
three
bothers me. These
specific
are
suits: wetland protection, the air pollution, and the toxins related to mercury and arsenic.
What does that
That's
even
three specific
mean?
things.
The air pollution? What
He
suit is that? What law
sued
was he contesting?
He sued to reduce regulations around carbon pollution in the air.
Okay. So all regulations are good, and anyone who challenges them is an accomplice to Hitler's rise, is a denier. I mean, what you're doing
No, these are
is
conclusions to which
preventing
you are arriving.
No, actually, I'm not making the claim. I'm merely saying there's probably another side to the argument. You seem wholly ignorant of it and not interested in learning it. And instead, you are content with dismissing this guy as a moral criminal. And I'm saying that that's not the kind of conversation that leads to solutions. It's the kind that leads to demonizing other people. And that's bad. That's my point. Do you not accept that? Can you see what I'm talking about?
I see what you're talking about, that name-calling and hate speech and toxic rhetoric is how we've derived at this point. We have a president-elect who has built a whole campaign cycle around it.
You just compared this guy to Hitler, and then with a straight face, you're going to accuse him of engaging in hate speech. I mean, I'm sorry, I can barely hear the irony alarm is so loud in the background. I don't want to be cruel to you.
This man, Donald Trump, has appointed as his chief strategist and top advisor, Steve Bannon. Are you going to tell me that Steve Bannon is not a white supremacist, is not an anti-Semite, that he is putting that very ideology in the Oval Office?
Yeah. All right. We got the hand gestures down, but the argument leaves something to be desired. Aaron, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it. We've got a lot of big news today out of Trump Tower.
Thanks for having me.
So you're one of the most hated. It's hard to know who's the most hated man in America, but you're definitely up there.
Yeah. No,
you know what I mean? And I'd give you the crown, but I don't have the poll here. So typically when people are under assault in the press, they go through a now familiar series of public confessions. They go on Ellen and cry. They go on Dancing with the Stars, humiliate
or
themselves.
Just hide.
Or hide, exactly. Move to Barbados. You've gone onto Twitter and just gone like crazy. So election, I can't even read some of these because they're too over the top, but election night you tweeted this to Hillary Clinton. I've always hated you, you stupid blank. Time to close the Clinton Foundation. No more influence to peddle, Hillary Clinton. You go on, you attack celebrities, Britney Spears you attack, and then, I mean, I could just go on and on and on. Bernie Sanders, you're a loser who doesn't understand economics or business. Keep my name out of your mouth. Take your communism to a country that wants it.
Well, that's what happened, right? I mean, this country rejected socialist and communist policies.
Well, sure, but your strategy has been to, rather than pull back, just to bull forward.
I look at our president-elect. Being honest and authentic, even if it's imperfect, is something that Americans like. I could have easily done all of the, we hired consultants for millions of dollars that'll tell me the right way to look and the right way to act in front of news cameras. But at the end of the day, I can only be myself, and that's why I think one of the reasons why Donald Trump is our president-elect.
Did anybody advise? Did you have any advisors say, you know what, if you really want to rehabilitate your image, go on Twitter and give the finger to Hillary Clinton?
No one's told me that.
Okay, nobody did?
No, but I think, speaking from the heart is something, again, you have someone like Hillary Clinton who is carefully trained, carefully manicured product to be consumed by our electorate, and she lost. And honesty trumps, I think, this sort of fake persona that, 90% of pharmaceutical CEOs have.
Right.
I think they sort of look and act the part, but the reality is they're 100 times worse than I am.
So you were at the bottom of a media dog pile, a hate fest. It was like that short story, The Lottery. You were being stoned by the crowd. So I'm sympathetic to that. However, I have to say, in cases like yours, and in yours specifically, where you have someone who takes a product he did not create, added no apparent value to it, and then jacks the price up, it does seem like kind of a parasite move.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These big drug companies, they don't look at these drugs any more fondly than you look at the shoes in your closet that you haven't worn in 5 years and you're ready to throw away. They're old medicines that nobody cares about anymore, and they get passed around from company to company to company looking for a home for tender love and care. The reason they get passed around is because they're not Viagra, they're not Lipitor, they're not big sellers. These drugs sell almost nothing, and it costs millions of dollars to make a medicine. Even to make it for one drug I bought, the company stopped making it because it wasn't worth it to them.
Right.
And the 300 patients that needed this drug to survive, they didn't have anybody that actually wanted to make the pill for them, just stamp out a pill. And so we bought that drug, we raised it 20-fold. There was no media celebrity. There was no, nobody knew who I was that day, the day before, the day after. It was only after, I've done this about 6 times, and each time the patients thank me for doing it because they say, I'd rather have someone make a few dollars and make my pills reliably, maybe continue research in the field, give grants out, do the things that you need to do to be a drug company. Because when I have this rare disease, only a few hundred people have my illness.
Right.
I don't have the numbers of erectal dysfunction or cholesterol.
I get that, but if you raise it 5,000%, it seems a bit like a hostage situation.
It's still barely profitable, and if you look at the amount of people that have this illness and you add it all up, there are orphan drugs that are $500,000 a year, every year, forever. So you got to pay a drug company $5 million to survive. That's a hostage situation. Our pill is $25,000 if you take it for the amount of time you're supposed to take it. That's pretty comparable, or even a lot less than most of the drugs of its kind. So I looked at it and said, you know, I don't listen to the media. I don't listen to politicians. I listen to rationality and logic, and I think you do as well. And I'm going to price this drug where it belongs, not where somebody tells me to, not where it's going to look bad or make me look good. And I'm going to serve these patients, and that's what I've done.
So you're now facing criminal charges not related to this.
That's right.
So how did that happen?
It's a good question.
The Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, no, I wish I had the Bill Clinton Loretta Lynch friendship that apparently allowed him to talk to Hillary Clinton and Loretta Lynch and explain his situation before she was indicted. But unfortunately, I don't have that kind of pull. I think a lot of people feel my prosecution was politically motivated, and that these charges are very hard if you try to read what happened. It's very hard to understand. We don't even understand what exactly was done that was illegal. And I think that this case was only really brought after I was thrust in the media spotlight after the Daraprim situation.
Did the investigation begin before you became infamous?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. But your contention is you never would have been indicted had it not been for the attention that Hillary brought to you by tweeting about you.
Never is a strong word, but you know, prosecutors, like any other politician, they become famous when they indict famous people. These prosecutors need a job at a law firm to, they need to make $5 million working at a top law firm. The same way Preet Bharara could make $5 million if he became a partner at one of the law firms of this building.
So you like Trump, I think.
Sure.
Seem to on Twitter anyway.
Loved him.
But Trump is making a counter case, really kind of against yours. He did with Boeing the other day. He said, you know what, we want him to make money, but we don't want him to make too much money.
Yeah, and I don't want to make too much money either. You know, Turing is a company that's across the street from here, literally catty corner. Its profit margins are very thin. Pfizer raises the drug price of Viagra 13% last year. 13%. Okay. You're supposed to raise prices to
Not to brag, but I wouldn't know.
Yeah. You're supposed to raise prices in line with inflation to combat, inflationary forces. That's why your salary, maybe your salary goes up 10% a year, but most people's salaries goes up 1 or 2% a year because it's supposed to keep pace with inflation. It doesn't make sense to me that Pfizer, who's going to make, $10-20 billion this year, needs to raise the price of Viagra 10%. I've got 100 people catty corner from here barely making ends meet. We're trying to make new drugs for rare diseases. We need the money. Boeing doesn't need the money. Pfizer doesn't need the money. I started Turing 2 years ago. And we're doing groundbreaking research in 5 or 6 different diseases. And I think it's okay for us to make a small profit.
So you're cool with the government coming down on big companies and saying you're price gouging, but not on little companies or your company?
I'm not cool with any communist price fixing. I think what Trump wants to do is pretty smart. He understands that pharma companies have been getting away with quite a nice gig raising drug prices. And I think what he wants to do is encourage FDA to approve generics more quickly.
Yes.
And the FDA's done a very bad job of that. And I think that if he can figure that out, and I think he will, he seems to be on top of things, there'll be a lot more competition in the drug marketplace.
Wouldn't that undercut your business?
Sure. But part of being a business person is taking advantage of the playing field like a football game. And if they're throwing a blitz, I'm gonna pass, and vice versa. And the situation in the play field was set up the way it was when I started my company.
Yep.
And I'm not permanently going to, I do drug research. If they're going to incentivize that would help me. So, it depends on the situation.
Interesting. Martin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You did not come with security. I just want our viewers, it's good to see you. That was really interesting. President Obama, a student and the youth vice chairman of the Michigan Republican Party. He's an elector, and he's been threatened. Michael, great to see you tonight.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you described, I think, to the Detroit News or the Free Press or one of your papers in Michigan, you characterized the threats you're getting this way, and this is my favorite line ever. You said, people are saying, and I'm quoting, "You're a hateful bigot. I hope you die."
Yeah.
I just love the irony.
The irony is lost on them.
It's fantastic. So what kind of response have you gotten since you're an elector?
Yeah, so obviously this political cycle has been very divisive, and unfortunately it bled over into the weeks following the election. And I've just been inundated, not just myself, but electors across the country with hundreds of emails, Facebook messages, letters to my home. I'm getting like 5 or 6 a day, got a large stack on my dining room table, and they're just generally very hateful, angry messages. And unfortunately, I've received a couple of death threats, some death wishes, and just some angry messages from people who are disappointed in the election results.
And so the idea is that as one of the 538 people whose votes will matter the most on December 19th, you want to change your vote and vote for someone else?
Yeah, that's their intention. Unfortunately, if they did some research and Googled it, they'd find that it's a pointless endeavor. See, here in Michigan, we have these laws that protect the Michigan electorate against faithless electors, and they say essentially that if we attempt to change our votes in any way, our votes will be voided and we'll be replaced by another elector who will do the bidding of the electorate.
Who will do the will of the voters. So you see yourself as a stand-in, a voter by proxy for the voters of Michigan?
I see myself as somebody who's there to deliver the message that the popular vote of the state of Michigan sent on November 9th.
Right. Exactly. So have the messages you've received been specific in who you ought to vote for? Is it all Hillary, or is there some other Republican you ought to vote for? Like, what exactly is the plan? We've been trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so I saw some headlines recently that some people were trying to get us to switch our votes for Kasich, but I've only been asked to change my vote to Hillary Clinton by a lot of these people. So, yeah.
So I know it's against the law in Michigan, as you just said, but are you tempted at all?
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, these kind of threats and hypocritical messages from the left are one of those things that kind of reaffirm my support for Donald Trump. I think it's hilarious that people think, as you read earlier, that sending death threats saying that I'm a hateful bigot, I hope you die, would ever get me to want to change my vote. I think it's ridiculous.
Well, if there's any way to fight hate, it's with death threats, as we know. Michael,
yeah.
It's great to see you tonight. Thanks a lot for being brave enough to come on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And next, he's taken on all types of dirty jobs. Now, Mike Rowe is training his attention on perhaps, he wrote something very specific. I'm going to read it to you again in case you don't remember writing it. There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump. I'm not contesting it was a close election. I'm, of course, familiar with the numbers. How did Russia steal the election? Please be precise.
The way I just said, by doing things that were intended to help him and to hurt Hillary Clinton. I don't think initially that was what the Russians were expecting to happen. They thought, like almost everyone else, including Trump himself, that Hillary would win the election. They were trying to damage her, make it closer, make her weaker. But as it got closer to the end, they saw the possibility of him winning.
But hold on, I don't want to interrupt you, and I don't want to talk over each other, but you're saying, how would you know what the Russians think? Do you have special access to the thinking of Vladimir Putin? How would you know that? And again, for the third time, how did they steal the election? You said they stole the election, and I'm open-minded, but I want to know how they did that specifically.
Well, I think I've just told you twice, and I know you like to argue, but what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that the Russians are going to have enormous influence in a Trump administration, and this is not something that should only bother Democrats or liberals. It's an American issue. It's a patriotic issue.
Okay, but hold on. I'm sorry. You wrote, you're a college professor. You have a real job. You wrote on one of the biggest websites in the world, the Huffington Post, that they stole the election. Now I'm quoting, the survival of the American Republic is at stake. We have only 10 days to save the Republic from a hostile takeover by billionaire oligarchs and their Russian backers. I want to know how this happened. How specifically did they influence the election? By releasing these emails? Do you have evidence that these emails swayed the election results? If so, what is that evidence? I mean, you made all these claims.
Are you seriously suggesting that the emails did not have an influence on the election? I mean, everyone knows that. It's
well, how does everyone? I mean, everyone. Let's say
Trump would say they didn't. He's the one who kept telling the Russians
so your position is we just know
go ahead and release them.
Come on. You're making specific claims. You say they stole the election, and I'm not misquoting you. You wrote that like 3 days ago, and I'm asking you how, and you won't answer, and you're instead saying it was a very close election.
I have answered it repeatedly. What I would like to, instead of getting into an argument over that, would like to ask why everyone in the country is not seriously upset not only about the Russian intervention in the election, but the fact that the National Security Advisor is very close to Putin. The incoming Secretary of State is very close to Putin.
Look,
Mr. Trump
we're going to be debating that for the rest of the show.
Continued to talk about Putin in the most glowing terms. This is crazy. I mean,
then let me ask you.
I can't imagine if this was on the other in the other direction.
If it was on the other side,
what people like you would be saying. What you'd be saying if Hillary Clinton had been helped by the Russians and
I don't want to keep talking over you.
Russian-favorable people into the government.
I have to say, I would ask the exact same question, which is, if you're going to claim that a foreign government influenced the outcome of elections in this country, be very specific about how they did it. Do you think they altered the count from the voting machines? Do you think a specific piece of propaganda? Okay, then
there
what
is no
specific
evidence of that.
Okay, then tell me your
I have told
evidence.
you
You're making me
repeatedly
frustrated.
what they did. What we know they did was to put out the emails.
Please just hear my question.
And incidentally, if you let me talk for just a moment, if you let me talk for just a moment, it's interesting that Mr. Trump focused in on the claim that was in one of the news stories over the weekend that the RNC was also hacked and insisted that wasn't true. Well, let's think about why he would want to insist that. Because if, in fact, the RNC was hacked and they couldn't put anything out.
I have you on to offer evidence to support something that you wrote, and I'm giving you airtime in front of a lot of people.
And I have offered you the evidence
of
that. What I would like to do is talk about why you and every other American should be concerned about an American government beholden to Vladimir Putin.
I'm concerned enough to have you on, and you are literally the last guest I'm going to ask this of, because I've asked it for the last 5 days, not one person has answered. Name one email or one piece of information that was false that got into the media bloodstream in America that you think was sufficient to influence the election for Donald Trump. Just name one.
Did I say that they were false? No, I didn't say they were false.
Then name a real one and show some evidence that it influenced voter behavior.
For the express purpose of helping Trump.
But name one piece of information from WikiLeaks that you can show influenced voter behavior on a scale sufficient to pull the election for Trump. You can't.
Remember, we just talked about a moment ago a scale sufficient. If you look at the total vote, the number of votes that gave Trump a lead in the electoral college,
I'm going to stop you there. You were saying irresponsible things that are misleading people, and I think it's wrong.
The entire electorate.